What's up, listeners, and welcome to Slide Into Sports, live on 103.1 FM radio, WVLP. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, and there is a lot of newsworthy things for college football that we have to get into. I did say we were going to get into college basketball a little bit today as well, or not even a little bit, but for the majority of this week's broadcast. But these news stories for college football, they are just so crazy that you just can't not talk about them. So let's just jump right on into it with the Heisman Trophy. Obviously, that was huge event this weekend that we talked about last week. And Fernando Mendoza, Indiana's quarterback, won the Heisman Trophy with 643 first-place votes out of about 950 votes. There's 870 media votes, but there was also 59 votes from former Heisman winners, and one voter that was to the public at large. So there, a lot of people that contributed to the voting process of the Heisman Trophy, and this is huge. Because Indiana has never had a Heisman finalist, let alone a Heisman Trophy winner. So this is just huge for Indiana football, the program as a whole. And I think it really, if the Big Ten championship didn't do it already, this Heisman Trophy really shows how Indiana football is the representation of the new era of football, of NIL era football. So congratulations to Fernando Mendoza, the winner of the Heisman Trophy Award, also known on social media as Heisman Mendoza. Just amazing job. Well done. Great season for you and for Indiana football. Congratulations. We're all cheering for you, and we're so excited for you to bring the Heisman back to not back to Bloomington, but just to Bloomington, because it's never been to Bloomington before. So, again, congrats to Fernando Mendoza and to Indiana football, to Kurt Cignetti, to Indiana University. Just what an achievement. In second place was Diego Pavia. Third place was Jeremiah Love, and fourth place was Julian Sayin. They were the top four candidates that ended up going to New York. There was other candidates as well that were in consideration. There was Jacob Rodriguez, who was in fifth. Jeremiah Smith came in sixth in the voting. Gunnar Stockton, seventh. Trinidad Chambliss, eighth. Caleb Downs, ninth. And Haynes King, 10th. So those are the top 10 Heisman candidates. Indiana did have someone in the top 10 last year, or top 12. That was Curtis Rourke, but he did not make the trip to New York. But he still also had a great season for Indiana. So just seeing Indiana players in the Heisman rankings is huge. And like I said earlier, if the Big Ten championship didn't boost Indiana as a football program already, this Heisman Trophy victory will boost the program that much more, especially in recruiting. Obviously, National Signing Day already happened. Indiana had, I believe it was the 31st ranked recruiting class, which, that's pretty good out of 136, 137 schools that you're competing against ultimately. So, that's pretty solid there. But one of the things that, is trending differently for Indiana and why their recruiting classes are starting to get ranked higher is because they're starting to get more 4 and 5 stars. They're starting to, add some more talent to their depth. And I think, to me, this just means that it's the beginning for Indiana football. If you didn't get that message last year, which I understand if you didn't, because it did kind of seem like Indiana was going to be a one-hit wonder, with the people that did leave and either went to the NFL or, lacked the eligibility to compete. But yeah, I think this year really solidified last year's message, and I think Indiana football is going to be here to stay for a while, and I think that's really great and exciting for the sport of college football. Speaking of things that are not so exciting for the sport of college football, Sherrone Moore and the University of Michigan, and this was okay. So this, just to sum up this story, this happened a couple of days after National Signing Day. So this is when they had all the recruits solidified. Sherrone Moore got fired from the University of Michigan for an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. And this is only the beginning of the story, surprisingly. But what ended up happening was they brought him into the athletic director's office. Athletic director fired him, and Sherrone Moore went home, and he ultimately crashed out, I guess, in simple terms. And yeah, he broke into the female staff member's home and made threats, and then got arrested and is currently in court. So Michigan obviously entering the coaching carousel really late in the game and at a very weird time, and Sherrone Moore in a just terrible situation. I'm not entirely sure what he's going to do from here. He is probably going to be facing jail time. He has 3 criminal charges. The first one is home invasion in the 3rd degree. That's punishable by up to 5 years in prison. There's also stalking, which is a misdemeanor, punishable by up to 1 year in jail, and breaking and entering or entering without breaking, which is a misdemeanor, punishable by up to 90 days in jail. There is a bond, though. There was a $25,000 bond with conditions, including wearing a GPS tether, continuing mental health treatment, abstaining from alcohol and drugs, not possessing a weapon, and having no contact with the victim, which, I mean, those are pretty standard conditions for a case like this, as you could probably imagine. The next court date that he has is January 22nd, which is little more than a month from now. So for right now, there's nothing really to update on this story, but you can't really help but feel bad for the players that, are hearing about this story. They're going to be competing in the Cheez-It Bowl against Texas in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like right at New Year's Eve. So yeah, like 2 weeks from now. So yeah, they're gonna likely have an interim head coach if they don't hire a head coach by then. Right now, their interim head coach is Biff Poggi. But again, like I said, we'll see if they hire a head coach before that bowl game, because that is obviously a possibility that Michigan might consider. And they might do that in an attempt to hold on to recruits. But yeah, it's a very tricky situation for the University of Michigan, the players involved, and the athletic administration, because now for the University of Michigan Athletic Administration, this is the, like, I guess apparently 7th time that they've had some kind of scandal surrounding the school since, or at least the 7th, like Sherrone Moore was the 7th individual that has been tainted with scandal since Jim Harbaugh became the head coach at Michigan. So that's a very tough situation for that athletic department to navigate. A lot of scandal, a lot of scary and sad stories ultimately. Okay, kind of going back to the Heisman Trophy really fast. There was also, these guys, they're in New York, right? And when you're in New York, you party a little bit, right? And Diego Pavia, he went clubbing in New York after the results of the Heisman Trophy presentation, I guess. And so when he was in the club, he said on an Instagram story, he reposted something that Theo Vaughn posted, which was just a group picture. And, obviously Diego Pavia was in it. There was a few other people. So it was basically like essentially Theo Vaughn's party at the club. And Diego Pavia reposted Theo Vaughn's Instagram story post and said, F all the voters with a thumbs down emoji, but ... family for life. Now, when I first saw that, I was really upset. And I also understood because, looking back on the season and behavior from other people inside Diego's family, it checked and it made sense that he would probably post something like that on social media after not winning, because he's been campaigning for the Heisman more than he's been campaigning for his team to be in the playoffs. And it's like, no wonder Vandy was outside of the playoff conversation, but because they are a 10-2 team in the SEC, but I guess don't lose to Texas, who's 9-3. I don't know, but yeah. Then he posted on Twitter on Sunday, and he said this. He said, being a part of the Heisman ceremony last night as a finalist was such an honor. As a competitor, just like in everything I do, I wanted to win. To be so close to my dream and come up short was painful. I didn't handle those emotions well at all and did not represent myself the way I wanted to. I have much love and respect for the Heisman voters and the selection process, and I apologize for being disrespectful. It was a mistake, and I am sorry. Fernando Mendoza is an elite competitor and a deserving winner of the award. I have nothing but respect for his accomplishments as well as the success that Jeremiah and Julian had this season. I've been doubted my whole life. Every step of my journey, I've had to break down doors and fight for myself because I've learned that nothing would be handed to me. My family has always been in my corner, and my teammates, coaches, and staff have my six. I love them. I am grateful for them, and I wouldn't want anything to distract from that. I look forward to competing in front of my family and with my team one more time in the ReliaQuest Bowl. And for context, that game is being played against Iowa. So it's going to be Vanderbilt versus Iowa. And the only thing, though, just looking through some of these comments, he's saying, nothing but respect. But when he was at the club, like I was saying earlier, I was referencing the club earlier, he bought a sign that said, and, I can't say the full word, but F Indiana. He bought that at the club. So, people clearly, just looking at some of these comments are not taking it with sincerity. They don't think that he's being sincere. And I think to some degree, I think he is probably being sincere. You see some of the comments yeah, it is true. He, you look back at his story when he first came to Vanderbilt, he has been doubted his whole life. And so that makes sense. That is understandable. That's understood by everybody. But you can't be going around, saying stuff like F the voters and F Indiana and, just, I guess, doing too much in a sense. But, throughout the press tour that he was on, there was, I believe it was Daily Mail that, was asking him this. It might not have been Daily Mail. It might have been somewhere else, but I found it on Daily Mail. And it was a bracket where he had to choose between, I believe it was Johnny Manziel and Lamar Jackson. It was a tournament, a randomized bracket assigning of who was the better Heisman candidate or whatever. And Diego Pavia, he was asked Johnny Manziel or Lamar Jackson, and he goes, me. He says me after saying neither of them. So I don't think people are really taking this too seriously, or at least his apology too seriously. I mean, yeah, it's just a very, very bad look, and it's not. It'll affect his NFL draft stock. That's all I'll say about that. I think that's gonna really affect his NFL draft stock, because you can't be conducting yourself that way and expect to lead an NFL team. So. Yeah. Okay, now let's start getting into college basketball, since it was a pretty exciting week last week. Arizona, currently now the number 1 team in the country, that should stay the same after Arizona beat Alabama on Saturday. So we'll see who moves around below them. Purdue was previously in the number 1 spot, but they had lost to Iowa State at home. They got absolutely blown out in the second half of the game. Purdue just could not score in that game, so they fell to 6th. So they're still in the top 10, but obviously a loss like that hurts. But Iowa State was 10th at the time, so it's it didn't hurt Purdue too bad. It was also their first loss, so, Michigan currently in 2nd place on the AP, Duke in 3rd, Iowa State 4th, UConn 5th, Purdue 6th, Houston 7th, Gonzaga 8th, Michigan State 9th, BYU in 10th, Louisville 11th, Alabama in 12th, Illinois 13th, North Carolina 14th, Vanderbilt 15th in basketball, which I'm surprised there's no one really talking about that. Vanderbilt is currently 9-0. Wow. Texas Tech 16th, Arkansas 17th, Florida 18th, Kansas 19th, Tennessee 20th, Auburn 21st, St. John's 22nd, Nebraska 23rd, Virginia 24th, and UCLA in 25th. And other teams receiving votes were Iowa, Oklahoma State, USC, Georgia, St. Mary's, Seton Hall, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Indiana, Clemson, LSU, Villanova, Cal, Notre Dame, Miami, SMU, TCU, Arizona State, Miami, Ohio, and St. Bonaventure. So, looking back on some of these games, there were some pretty crazy games that happened. Obviously, I already mentioned the Purdue Iowa State one. That was nuts. But let's start from the beginning of the week. Let's start back on Sunday. So, starting on Sunday, I think, or I guess really the only big game on Sunday was Creighton versus Nebraska. And the only reason I say that's like big is because you look at it and it is a in-state rivalry. I mean, I don't think a lot of people know, or at least, a lot of casual watchers know that Creighton is from Nebraska. Like, it's a Nebraska school. And I mean, I only bring that up because for a really long time, I didn't know that Creighton was in Nebraska. So, yeah, I just mainly didn't think that because a lot of the teams in the Big East are in the East. Like you think of UConn, like UConn's in Connecticut, right? St. John's is in New York. Okay, like Georgetown is, like, I think in Maryland. It's like they're all like on the East Coast or like the eastern side of the Midwest, right? Except for Creighton. Like, I don't know. It's a little weird. It's a little weird to me, but like, yeah, that's part of the reason why I never thought Creighton was in Nebraska for a long time. But obviously, like, for a while I've known that they are in Nebraska, but I just thought it was interesting to point out because, a lot of people talk about, at least for college football, how teams have to travel a lot with these new super conferences, with the Big Ten having 4 teams on the West Coast, for having 2 teams on the East Coast and a majority of the teams in the Midwest, and how, like, that's weird. And the ACC, like, same thing. Like, all their teams are on the Atlantic coast except for Stanford and Cal and SMU, which is really weird. So, yeah, I mean, that, like, Creighton's been in the Big East for a while, so I'm surprised that, like, not more people have brought it up, is more my point. But anyway, Creighton lost to Nebraska 50-71, and like I said before, Nebraska is ranked, and Nebraska has been, churning up a bunch of wins. They're currently 9-0 right now. They just absolutely demolished Creighton in the first half. They held Creighton to 19 points in the first half. They scored 33 points in the second half. Just total dominance over the Blue Jays. Held them to 24% from the 3-point line. I think this might be a down year for Creighton because they're already 5-4. Like, this is not looking good for Creighton. I don't, at this point, the way they've looked, I don't know if they make the tournament this year. Whereas Nebraska, I think Nebraska might be a force in the Big Ten. They might be a sneaky force in the Big Ten. So, yeah, just dominance by Nebraska. They had 7 steals and caused 11 turnovers for the Creighton Blue Jays. So, obviously, Nebraska, thick as thieves in that game. But, yeah, I mean, turnovers, they hurt. Like, they hurt. And you cannot turn the ball over in basketball because basketball is a very fast-paced game. You get momentum going, like turnovers are the first things that cause momentum to swing. You don't want momentum to swing, away from you. I mean, that's what timeouts are for. Timeouts help with the swinging of momentum, but ultimately, you only have a limited amount of timeouts in games, and you can't always rely on timeouts to get momentum swings. You have to be able to control the game. And turnovers are like I said, that's one of the first points of, how to tell whether or not a team is controlling or losing control of a game. And it can increase the pace of the game as well, because, the opposing team is just constantly running it to your side of the floor. And it's just, it can feel overwhelming when you're competing against that. So that was how Nebraska beat Creighton right there. They just forced Creighton to turn the ball over, and Creighton turned it over at will. BYU on Tuesday, they had a close game against Clemson, who's currently unranked. Clemson lost 64-67. Clemson is currently 7-3. BYU 8-1. Clemson. So actually, Clemson gave up a huge lead in the second half of the game. Clemson was up 43-22 against BYU in the first half, which, wow, that's huge. And you look at the turnovers, they're about even in turnovers. Clemson had 11 turnovers, BYU had 9, and both teams had a lot of steals and blocks. So this huge defensive battle, the stats back that up as well. BYU not very efficient from behind the three-point line, so they had to get all of their points from inside the paint for the most part, and that they did. They got 34 points inside the paint. And this was in Madison Square Garden as well, so that's also big venue. So this is a big neutral site game. But yeah, just how BYU came back, it was amazing. And they put up 45 points in the second half to pull off this comeback and held Clemson to 21 points. So, I guess in BYU's case, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. But yeah, great game by both these teams. Clemson, shocking BYU, and BYU just coming back and, proving themselves. Then there was number 18 Florida versus number 5 UConn on the same day. This was played also in Madison Square Garden. UConn, they were up 39-32. So all they really needed to do in the second half was just hold on, and that they did. Florida, they started storming back. They put up 41 points in the second half. UConn put up just enough points to, get the W. They got 38 points. UConn, very efficient from the field. They were 50% exactly from the field. You look at the blocks and steals. Florida had 7 blocks compared to UConn's 3 blocks, and they both had 3 steals. But, Florida, they've got a lot of tall guys now, so they're able to, get more blocks than other teams. You're going to see a lot of blocks from Florida this year. Florida, what ultimately hurt them, they were 4 for 15 behind the 3-point line. UConn was 8 for 18, so they doubled the amount of 3-pointers that Florida took, and, every point counts. That's a whole 12 points that UConn had over, no, not 14, 12, excuse me. It was 16 points that, no, it was 12. No, it was 12. Forget what I'm saying. 12 points that UConn had, a 12-point edge that UConn had because of 3-pointers. If you also look at it this way, every basket besides free throws are 2 points. So UConn, you could also argue, actually had a 4-point edge, which, if you look at the score, How many points did UConn win by? They won by 4 points. They won 77-73. So those 4 3-pointers that UConn made that Florida didn't make, you could argue that was the big difference in the game. Like, that was the main difference. But UConn, they've got a great all-around game. Florida, they're more strong inside the paint. They're not the best from outside right now. I mean, they lost their best three-point shooter last year, or to the draft from last year. So, yeah. And some other going into some other games now. We've got, hold on. So let's move into Thursday. This was Iowa versus Iowa State, the Cyhawk rivalry game that was played in Hilton Coliseum in Ames. So it's played at Iowa State. Iowa started off with the lead at the half. They were up 33-25. But Iowa State, they battled their way back and put up 41 points in the second half and held Iowa to 29. So that ultimately led to Iowa State winning 66-62. Looking at some of the stats, Iowa, the past few years, not even really past few years, but I mean, ever since I've really watched Iowa basketball, they've been great from behind the three-point line. Iowa was 46, almost 47% from behind the three-point line. And really, in general, Iowa was more efficient at shooting than Iowa State was. But the key, and, going back to the first game that we were talking about today, the turnovers. The turnover battle is huge. I mean, Iowa State forced Iowa to have 15 turnovers. They had 11 steals, 6 blocks. Like, that's something Iowa State did to Purdue as well. Like, they just forced them to turn the ball over and over and over, and forcing them to make mistake after mistake. And sometimes when you get those turnovers and you're trying to, prevent them from getting points, you get fouls. Like, that's an easy way to get fouls. And so that's why you look at the free throw stat line. Iowa State had 23 free throws versus Iowa's 5 free throws. So turnovers, like, they help in more ways than one. In Iowa State, they capitalize. I mean, but the efficiency that Iowa had kept Iowa in the game, unlike Purdue when Purdue played Iowa State. And, I mean, we can look at some of those stats as well, because, I mean, those stats were astounding to me for Purdue. I mean, you look at the three-point line, Purdue was 22% from behind the three-point line in that game against Iowa State. And they were only 40% from the field, which is uncharacteristic for this Purdue team especially. So, yeah. And, I mean, you look at the turnovers, like, Purdue had 15 turnovers in that game. So, again, like, Iowa State, a great, great defensive team, and that ultimately gets them to, win their big games. All right, before we talk any more about college basketball, I have a message from our sponsor. This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com. Okay, here we go. So, Now we're getting into the more recent games that happened last week. And this would be Nebraska, Illinois. This is another recent game that happened. Illinois ranked 13th. Nebraska ranked 23rd. And this brought Nebraska to 11-0. Nebraska won 83-80. In the first half, the Illini and the Cornhuskers were tied at 37 apiece. Nebraska, they got the edge. They scored 46 points to the Illini's 43. Nebraska just super efficient from the three-point line, 12 for 26. Nebraska, kind of like Iowa, just a great three-point shooting team. But from the field, 51.6% from the field is also great for that team as well. Nebraska doesn't typically have like that big of a team. So again, like being that efficient from the field is pretty huge to me. You don't really neither of these teams really committed that many turnovers. Illinois committed 2 more turnovers than Nebraska did, 8-6. But yeah, it was a very even game. I think the Big Ten is, at least in basketball, is starting to look pretty deep. It's starting to look like a really deep conference, and I think it might be the conference that has the most teams going into the, March Madness tournament. So I think Nebraska, that is going to be a team to watch out for the rest of the year. We're going to see whether or not they're able to stay consistent with winning. All right, the last game that we're going to talk about, or at least, the last ranked game that we're going to talk about is number 1 Arizona versus number 12 Alabama. That happened on Saturday. Alabama was up 41-39 in the first half of this game. Arizona put up 57 points in the second half to come back and win. And in what looked like a close game, Arizona got a 21-point victory, 96-75. Just absolutely insane. And what's even more insane is, people have been talking a lot about this freshman, Koa Pete from Arizona. He only had 20 minutes of playing time in this game. So he only played for half of the game, and he only put up 6 points. Do you know who their highest score was? It was Braden Berries. Number 5, the guard from Arizona. He played for 35 minutes, 28 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists. He had himself a game that day. Just absolutely had himself a game. Arizona and Alabama both were efficient about the same way. Like, they were equally efficient in shooting from the field, from the 3, and from the free throw line. Both were around 70% from the free throw line, around 38% from the 3-point line, and around 43% from the field. The difference, and I've been saying this a lot, which is, I guess, kind of the theme here, the broadcast. The big thing was turnovers. Arizona committed a mere 4 turnovers. Alabama committed 15 turnovers despite having 15 blocks. Arizona only had 1 block that game, but they had 10 steals. And Arizona, they just killed Alabama in the rebound battle. Alabama was able to get a decent amount of defensive rebounds. They got 27 defensive rebounds to Arizona's 28 defensive rebounds. But offensive rebounds, Arizona got 20 to Alabama's 3. So Arizona was getting a lot of second chance points that Alabama was not able to get. And, Arizona was getting those second chance points. So, great game by both these teams. Both these teams are incredibly good. We're probably going to see both Arizona and Alabama in March Madness. Don't know where they're going to be on the bracket. Arizona right now is looking like they could be the number 1 overall seed in the country, like going into the tournament, which would be huge. But yeah, this has been a wild season of college basketball. So who knows what's going to happen with the seeding and whatnot. Arizona could, for some reason, go cold maybe for like 2 weeks or something, and then, get hot again around like conference championship tournament season. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll be following it pretty thoroughly. Okay, now let's preview. No. We've got a huge, thing for IU basketball. IU played Penn State on Tuesday, December 9th. They won 113-72. And the only reason that I'm bringing this up right now is because Indiana's Lamar Wilkerson broke the scoring record at Indiana, which was previously set by Trace Jackson Davis. Lamar Wilkerson put up 44 points in that game. He was the leading scorer by a lot in that game. And he was only in for 24 minutes, but he made, I think it was 11 threes in a row or something like that. It was just incredible. So I had to bring that up. But yeah, when Indiana is on, when they're making their shots, they're extremely deadly. But when they're not making their shots, they're not the best shooting in the field because they don't really have height. That's the one weakness that Indiana basketball has, at least from what I've seen. They just don't have anyone that's really that tall. And I think that's what kills them. They need a big. They need someone like Kaufman Wren, who's really tall and big, to get points inside the paint reliably, and also to defend inside the paint as well. So yeah, but huge win by Indiana there. They did lose to Kentucky at Kentucky on Saturday. That they lost 60-72. They were winning in the first half of that game, but Wilkerson, he went out with 4 fouls about 5 minutes into the second half, and I think that's what hurt them a lot. Indiana also turned over the ball 17 times in that game, and that's something else I've noticed with this Indiana team is that they've been making, at least recently, they've been making some pretty careless mistakes with the ball. They haven't been taking really that great of care of the ball, and that's what's killed them in games like Minnesota, where they lost at the beginning of December. So I think Indiana, if they want to win more basketball games, they want to win the big basketball games, they need to take care of the basketball. That's my big thing there. I think they just need to take care of the basketball. Okay, so since the first round of the playoffs for college football are this weekend, I think we got to talk about it. We got to talk about these first few games. Obviously, there's 2 group of 5 teams in this tournament, and people are upset about the group of 5 being in the tournament, and I'm not necessarily against it. I get wanting the, quote unquote 12 best teams in. But you got to remember that the tournament, you get rewarded for being in the tournament. And, these Power Four conferences, they get so much money already, right? Like, they have huge alumni bases. They've got a whole bunch of avenues where they can get money from. Whereas, schools like James Madison, Tulane, South Florida, they don't really have anywhere to get money from, right? They don't have these big bags of money. So when they get in the playoffs and they get essentially a bag for their conference, like, they're able to use that on recruiting and updating their facilities and stuff like that, and being able to make their programs more competitive. And otherwise, like, what are they competing for? Because with this transfer portal era, like, ultimately what happens is, these players, they go to these smaller G5 schools, they compete, then they go to the transfer portal and get picked up by these Power Four programs. And people have been complaining about the transfer portal era. So what would make the transfer portal era a little less irritable for people? More competitive football programs. If there's more competitive football programs, then people are going to be less inclined to leave where they're at, right? Like, the players at Tulane, like, if they go out, maybe they win in the first round of the college football playoff. Do you think more people, like, more recruits are going to want to go to Tulane because of that? Yeah, I think so. And I mean, Tulane, look, between you and I, Tulane, I think, has the better shot at upsetting Ole Miss than James Madison does having upset Oregon. And the only reason that I'm saying that, obviously, is because Ole Miss does not have Lane Kiffin. Now, you could say, oh, well, Ole Miss, they have the same roster. Nobody's left yet. Blah, 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 blah. And you could just go on and on and on. And the reason why a head coach is so crucial and pivotal to the outcome of a game, in my opinion, is because the head coach, influences preparation. They influence the culture, right? They influence, what's like the player's state of mind, essentially. So if Lane Kiffin's not there, we don't know what Golding is going to have for his players at Ole Miss. We don't know if if he's going to maintain the culture that Lane Kiffin left behind. We don't know if the players are going to be fired up for, this college football playoffs, right? We don't know if, they're going to feel completely hopeless. Maybe they feel completely hopeless and drop one to Tulane. What happens then, right? So I think Oregon definitely has the more stable situation currently. Obviously, the defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator from Oregon are both taking up new jobs. The defensive coordinator is going to be the new head coach at Cal, and the offensive coordinator is going to be the new head coach at Kentucky next year. But because there's been a lot of time in between those hirings and these upcoming playoff games, I think Oregon will be fine and dandy, as they say. All right, so predicting some of these games, the first one on Friday, December 19th, which I guess is this Friday, Alabama versus Oklahoma. Now, this is a rematch between two SEC schools that played, but they played at Tuscaloosa the last time that they played. Now, Alabama, when they played Oklahoma, they outplayed Oklahoma on the offensive side of the ball. They just about doubled the offensive yardage that Oklahoma put up. But Oklahoma, they got a pick six. They were able to put up just enough points, primarily in field goals, against Alabama, and that got them the win. But yeah, like Oklahoma's elite defense is ultimately what got Oklahoma the win. Now, I think Oklahoma wins this one again, not just because it's in Norman, Oklahoma, but I also think they win because Alabama is coming in not 100% healthy. Like, they're not going to have their top two running backs in this game. Ty Simpson was nurturing a lower back injury in the Iron Bowl game, or after the Iron Bowl game in the SEC championship game. So we don't know what Ty Simpson is going to look like if he's going to be feeling 100%. So I think Alabama, they're coming in battered. They're basically limping across the finish line of their season. And I think they probably are going to lose to Oklahoma. Now, ultimately, I don't really think the outcome of this game necessarily matters because I think whoever comes out of this, I think is going to get steamrolled by Indiana. But that's just me. But, I think ultimately, I think Oklahoma will win. And out of the two teams, I think Oklahoma would present the greatest challenge, primarily because of their defense. Because I think their defense can maybe disrupt the Indiana offense, but I don't think Oklahoma's offense is going to be able to do enough against Indiana's defense because Indiana also has an amazing defense. Moving on to Miami versus Texas A&M. Now, why this game is at 11 in the morning and not on prime time, don't know. I don't know how they schedule these, but it is what it is, I suppose. But yeah, Miami versus Texas A&M in the We Beat the Irish Bowl. And Miami, they've looked really good ever since losing to SMU. They've looked like they did at the beginning of the year when they beat Notre Dame. Texas A&M, they looked pretty bad when they played Texas, and towards the end of the year, that offense and Marcel Reed, they've just been turning the ball over a lot. And, especially when it comes to the postseason, I think it's really important that you're able to take care of the football. And if you can't take care of the football, you can't, you're not going to win if you can't take care of the football. And I think Miami wins this one. And I think that'll be the one upset that happens this weekend is Miami over Texas A&M. It might really be the one upset that I think happens this whole tournament, to be completely honest. Just because the seeding is not all weird like it was last year. They've got Tulane, Ole Miss. Now, I was kind of talking about this game a little bit earlier and how, Tulane could maybe get one, or, Tulane has a better shot at upsetting Ole Miss than James Madison does against Oregon. And I do think that's true. I do stand by that. But I don't necessarily think that it will happen. You know what I mean? So I'm taking Ole Miss to beat Tulane. Now, Tulane could maybe surprise everyone and cover the spread. They could maybe make it close. But the thing is, these two teams have played before, and they've played in Oxford. So, it's really hard for me to pick against Ole Miss and against the spread. And so I'm picking Ole Miss in this game. Now, the final game that we're going to talk about is the JMU versus Oregon. And JMU, like, they've ran through their conference. They kind of get into the college football playoff by circumstance, really, because Tulane was the highest Group of 5 ranked conference champion, but because Virginia lost the ACC championship to Duke, James Madison then became the 5th highest ranked conference champion. So JMU just kind of found their way into the college football playoffs. Now, would it have been a lot cooler if James Madison and Indiana faced off? Yes, I think it would have been a lot cooler because that is where Curt Cignetti coached before coaching at Indiana. And it would have been really cool to see both those schools face off against each other. But we're not going to see that, so, teardrop. But I think Oregon is more legit than people think that they are. I don't think Oregon has really gotten a lot of credit for what they've done this year, especially the USC game. USC is not that bad this year. Yes, their defense is oftentimes questionable. Really just straight up not reliable this season. If we're being real here, they just were not really that reliable when they needed to be. And they did have their moments. Like USC did beat Michigan, right? They did beat a pretty hot Nebraska team at the time at their place and showed that they could win on the road. And USC did also beat Iowa in the rain. So, USC is not a soft team by any means. And people say, oh, well, Notre Dame didn't play anybody. And Notre Dame beat that same USC team. So, I feel like people don't get enough credit for beating USC, who had a great season. They had a great season. It was their first 9-win season since Lincoln Riley has been there. So, or since their first season with Lincoln Riley. So, great season for USC. But I think Oregon should steamroll James Madison in this game. And I think Oregon, it'll be a tune-up game before they play Texas Tech. And it'll be a needed one because I think Texas Tech is a force. They are a force to be reckoned with. That defense is legit. I think the only real weakness with Texas Tech is their red zone offense, but otherwise that's really it for Texas Tech's weaknesses. But yeah, I think that also before we sign off, I just wanted to point this out for with the playoffs. I don't understand why there is the first round games December 19th, 20th, 22nd, and then there's a 2-week gap. There's a 2-week gap before the next round of the playoffs is played. It's just really weird to me that that's the case. But, oh well. At least we have a playoff, I suppose. But that's all that we got time for today. If you want to see more content, I am extremely active on TikTok. I'm posting on TikTok all the time. Last week I didn't really post all that much because I was sick, but I'm back, and I'm feeling good. So, the TikTok will be more active. You can also listen to previous broadcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, and Patreon. I also post other content on Patreon as well. And yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about next weekend. It'll be the last broadcast before Christmas. So yeah, I guess with that, happy holidays and slide out.